So this is section 4, the last section in chapter 10. And real quick before we move on, I need to make a correction. On the last video, and I looked it up after I typed it, the last video I said that Chile's literacy rate was 96 and that the United States was even higher. I was wrong about that. I looked it up. The United States is actually 99%, was the 28th highest. So a lot of countries have that high. That was my mistake. And so, but Chile still has a 96.4% literacy rate, which is still very high for most countries, but it is not higher than the United States. So that was my fault. So moving on to section 4, it's the same standards. The objectives discuss Brazil and its Portuguese history, examine Brazil as an economic center, and analyze Brazilian culture. Now, Brazil is the Portuguese-speaking part of South America. And with the Treaty of Tordesillas, this gave the Portugal control of Brazil. It divided South America and gave Portugal Brazil, making Brazil the largest country in South America because they do have it consolidated under one control. Now, what it did, the Treaty of Tordesillas took a certain part of the land and split it and said, Spain, you get this part, Portugal, you get this part. Well, Portugal's part is Brazil. Most of the rest of South America is up for the Spanish-speaking part. So we're really going to be mostly talking about Brazil in this video. And you see this, here's a picture of the Treaty of Tordesillas, and it shows you where it's split, with Portugal having this area, Spain having this area. And this is a map of Brazil. The territory of Brazil was originally home to native peoples divided into hundreds of tribes and languages. Various estimates gathered there was between 1 million and 5 million people by the first time the colonists arrived in the 1500s. The Portuguese cleared out large areas of forest land to create sugar plantations. So what happened is, it's believed there was 1 to 5 million people, which is a wide number. We don't really know because none of us was alive in the 1500s to find out. But they cleared out large areas of forest land to create sugar plantations. Rio de Janeiro was established during this time, and the Portuguese they conquered the native tribes and put it to work in the sugar plantations. Now, as we found out with the Taino people of the Caribbean, this doesn't work out good. When the natives died from disease, they turned to African slaves for labor. So again, that's going to bring slaves from Africa into South and Central America. Is the Spanish or the Portuguese or the British in North America. They're bringing these slaves in. It's a thriving industry in Africa at the time. They're bringing slaves in to work at all these different areas. Here is a picture of Rio de Janeiro at night. Brazil remained a Portuguese colony from 1500 to 1822 when Napoleon defeated in 1815 people in Brazil that wanted their independence when Napoleon was defeated. But Portugal didn't allow it. So in 1815, when Napoleon was defeated, the people wanted their independence. Portugal said, no, you're not giving it to you. You're in our control. Many people signed petitions and kept pushing it until the King of Portugal agreed, and they gained their own independence in September of 1822. The culture of Brazil includes Portuguese, Native American, and African influences. When the settlers arrived there in Brazil, many of the natives there were only about 500,000, and most of them lived in the Amazon rainforest. So most of the native people that were from Brazil originally live in the Amazon rainforest, and they're still there. There's only about 500,000, where we talked about in the other slide that there was a bunch more than this to begin with, but it's going to be reduced by a huge percent of the population because of the conquest of the Portuguese coming in, the spread of disease, the spread of warfare, things like that is going to lead to a huge number of the population being cut down. Brazil has people from other cultures living there, including the largest Japanese population outside of Japan. The Portuguese brought their language and the Catholic religion to Brazil, and so many Brazilians are Catholic. The capitals moved towards the center of the country to help bring people from the coastline, because there's a lot of people on the coastline. It was being overpopulated. They wanted to kind of bring people in, so they moved the capital. It's a growing economic power. Natural resources help make Brazil an industrial power, and more than 1,000 rivers, including the Amazon, flow through Brazil, and these help with power plants to produce electricity. So It is an economic power. It's not like a little small country. They have a lot of natural resources. They have the Amazon flowing through there. Despite its economic success, there's still a gap between the rich and the poor. Urbanization is one way that many in Brazil try to change their lives by seeking jobs in the city. They believe that there's plenty of jobs in the cities, and so because of that, many people move to the city through urbanization to do this. There's also a growth in industry that's pushing people to move to the cities because they're building these factories close to the cities. There's also a move to the interior of Brazil, as 80% of the population live within 200 miles of the sea. Again, it's the reason why they moved the capital. One word that you need to know is Cerrado, is the fertile grasslands. And these fertile lands encourage Brazilians to move to the interior in search of commercial agriculture. The Cerrado has a large area of fertile lands inland, which tries to get people to move away from the sea. Just a few things about Brazilian life today. You have Carnival, which is where people celebrate in costumes and with floats. Samba, which is a Brazilian dance with African influences. And then Capoeira, which is martial art and dance that developed from African origins. So these are just some of the things today that's a big part of life in Brazil. Now here's a float from Carnival, and you see that these people have all these costumes on, all these people that are out here in the audience watching. It's just a huge thing that happens every year in Rio de Janeiro. And so that's kind of part of it. It's the cultural center of Brazil, Rio de Janeiro is. Rio has one of the most breathtaking and spectacular sceneries in the world. There's a dark side also with a large amount of crime and drug abuse. It's also rampant in Rio. So that brings us to the end of this. So we talked about a little bit of Rio de Janeiro there at the end. But we'll discuss Brazil and its Portuguese history, about how that it was a Portuguese colony until it got and became its independence from them. Examine Brazil as an economic center in the sense of, there's a number of things. Tourism is a big part, but farming and agriculture is also huge. And analyze Brazilian culture with Carnival and different things that happens there in terms of celebrations and festivals and things like that. So that brings us to the end of chapter 10 and section 4.